I am so excited today to have Kirstie on the podcast. For those of you that do not know, she's in Texas. She's up around Dallas, and she is an equine photographer as well. I would consider her one of my competitors, but I don't know. We work in different genres and we have a lot of different types of clients, and our businesses are very different. So I think the cool part is because of that, we are competitors, but at the same time, aren't, because we've positioned ourselves very differently in the industry, which I think is really neat to be able to have her on here and talk to her. And we've had conversations before about our different business models, which was a really great conversation that we had in the past. So I'm excited to talk to her today and to just dive into this topic. When I asked her about being on the podcast, she came up with this idea of what you would do differently if, you were building your business again. And I was like, that is such a cool topic, because I think there's so many of y'all that are, man, what do you wish you would have known in the beginning? Or what do you wish you would have done differently? So I think this should be a fun topic to dive into, especially because our businesses are so different. They're very different in some ways and they're similar in others. And I think that having these two different perspectives from us will be super cool to talk through and share our journeys and some different things about what we wish we would have known. So to get started, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and just tell everybody who you are, what you do, and share a little bit about how you got started in this industry.
Thank you so much for having me here, Corinda. I'm so excited to talk to you today. My name is Kirstie Jones, and I own Kirstie Marie Photography, a boutique studio about an hour north of Dallas. I'm an equine portrait photographer, and I do some commercial work, but I am primarily focused on photographing girls and their horses. So the vast majority of my clientele is portrait work. And I started my business in 2013. I started offering mentoring in 2015. I went full-time with my photography in 2017. We're recording this in 2023, so I'm coming up on 10 years of having this officially as a business. I picked up a camera in 2011, but officially a business, I'm coming up on a decade. So it's really humbling to look back on the journey thus far. But at the very beginning, you were asking for how I got into this. And I was studying finance in college, and I knew that I wanted to be in the world of finance, specifically in asset management. I had a lot of internships, great internships that were setting me up to go exactly where I wanted to go in that. And all of my college roommates, there were a couple of them that had DSLR cameras, and I was always borrowing them. I just liked nice pictures. I had no intention of being a photographer. I just liked nice pictures. So it was my senior year of college that I got tired of borrowing their cameras all the time, and I purchased one for myself. And I did that at Christmas, so it was a little Christmas present to myself. And I went straight to my front pasture and started taking pictures of the horses that were in my parents' front pasture when I was home on Christmas break. And horses were the only thing that I cared about, so they're the only thing that I ever took pictures of. It just started with random Arabian broodmares in a pasture to then I started asking my friends to be in my pictures with their horses. And then when I went back to school, I was asking my teammates to model with the school horses. And I really just fell in love with photographing girls and their horses. I had a heart horse of mine that I had to sell before going to college. I rode on the equestrian team at TCU. And so I was extremely grateful to be able to keep riding, but I had to sell all my horses when I went off to school. And so I just had this big hole in my heart that I really wish that I had for myself. Portraits that showed the relationship that I had with my show horses. I had all these show proofs from inside the arena, but that was such a different side of our relationship. And that really didn't, to me, commemorate fully what those horses meant to me. So it was my last year of college. I was engaged. I was planning my wedding. I was constantly on Pinterest. I fell deeply, madly in love with medium format film photographers and knew I wanted a film photographer for my wedding, and was just so deeply inspired by all of the pastel colors and really romantic imagery. And I just in my mind kept replacing the groom with a horse. And so in my business, or how I kept practicing my photography was basically taking that inspiration that was wedding photography and Style Me Pretty and all the wedding vlogs back in 2011, 2012, and just making that a different version where it was girls and horses instead of brides and grooms.
I love that. Our stories are really similar. There's a lot of parallels, and also the timeline of our stories is extremely similar. Because I started it's 2012, my last semester of college, and I was in the place of, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. I went to A&M, I had an animal science degree, and it hit me. My choices were to get a job somewhere way far away or go back to grad school. And I was like, man, I'm really tired of school. I don't know that I want to do this. And I was a working student at a barn, and I was bored between grooming and tacking up horses. And I was just sitting around the barn, and I grabbed this old camera out of my mom's closet. And I was like, I'm going to take this camera to the barn and take some photos while I'm watching Fran ride. And I started taking photos of the trainer I was working for riding. And then things just went in this weird progression of, I had the owner of a livestock photography company who they actually used to do all the big livestock shows here in Texas and all over the place. And I had interned for them the year before as just, I was in college. It was an internship. And I was like, let's go do this for a week at Houston. It'll be fun to spend the week at Houston. And no intention of photography, no thought of photography is something I want to do. But I went and interned for them, and my job was to get ears for cows, which I don't know if you've ever gotten ears for cows for a week straight.
Couple times. No, not that many cows and not for that long. No.
It was hard work. Oh my gosh. It was a great experience, but it was hard work. So I'd interned for them a year before just to do something. And the owner of the company saw my pictures I had been posting of the horses, and he reached out to me and was like, hey, Corinda, you should come work for us. Your pictures are really good. We'll help train you. And I was, okay, sure. I need something to do. I need to make some money. Cool. And I went and worked for them. The first show I actually worked was State Fair of Texas, and I photographed the breeding sheep show. And they were so gracious, and they helped me so much. He sold me a newer camera so that I had better equipment. They really helped teach me. And then I could be doing this on my own. I could make money doing this. And I launched my business. And of course, if you're listening to this and you've launched a photography business, I got in the trap of, are you going to do weddings? Are you going to do families? Are you going to do babies? And I just went down that whole path of being a wedding photographer. I think I booked my first wedding in a month and went down that whole pathway and started there, and really got lost along the way of the horse thing, which is where it began. And then just doing what everyone else was, oh, can you do this? And being, yeah, I guess, because I don't think I even knew me 10, 11 years ago. I don't think I even knew that there was such a thing as equine portraits. I knew there was wedding photographers. I knew there were families, babies, but I didn't realize that just taking portraits of girls with their horses was a thing for quite some time. So I got really lost along the way there. And I wish I would have just stayed true to myself and not had that moment where I had to go to Kentucky and I drove around for hours staring at horses and had this epiphany of, why the heck am I not doing this? This is what I started out with. This is what I love. And then got myself back to that place. And that's when I launched my photography brand. So I cannot even imagine if I would have gone full tilt in the horse world from day one. That would have been such a game changer for me instead of not wasting. It was good experience. I learned a lot, but all of those years in weddings and babies and building a studio and doing all those things that now I didn't need to build a studio. My studio is a great storage container now for all my wall art, but that's about it. So yes, my journey was a little bit more twisty and windy than yours for sure. So tell me this. If there was one thing that in those early years you wish you would have had somebody hit you over the head and be, you need to know this today. If you're starting a photography business, this is the one piece of advice that you have to have or you have to know that you wish you would have had in those early years.
I Okay, I was extremely fortunate in that final year of college. I worked for a great photographer, Arden Jenkins of Arden Proof of Photography. And I was an assistant who culled and edited her sessions, took care of things around her studio, and got to assist her on portrait shoots, got to assist her on newborn shoots, got to be a third shooter slash assistant at some weddings. And that's where I realized newborns are not for me, weddings are not for me. It was great to be more of a fly on the wall in those settings to be able to determine that's not what I want to do. I have no interest in that. But in being able to work in her studio several days a week, I was able to learn so much from her, both from what she taught me and also just from osmosis of just picking up what was around me. And she was such an incredible example. She had 4 kids at the time. So she was a mom, a totally bad A photographer, running a really big business and studio. And so I was super grateful for I was studying finance in the business school and had an understanding of finance and business. And then B, got to see that in the real world in a very established studio setting.
Mhm.
So saying that, that was in 2011 and 2012. So when I started my business in 2013, I do feel I had a substantial leg up in watching a successful studio run and being able to see a lot of the moving parts of that. And then also coming off of a business education. I have to say, from right there, from what you just said, one of my biggest things, because so many young people come to me and ask, do I study photography?
Mm,
And I'm the photography, and I'm coming from my experience. I did not study photography. The photography was self-taught. I learned a lot from Arden. I learned so much from Creative Live back then.
mm,
And then I just learned from doing. And the photography was so easy to learn and pick up and develop over the time. And so my number one advice is always study business.
yeah.
Always study business because I spend 5% of my time taking pictures, and we are the bookkeepers. We are the marketers. We are the client management personnel. We're the sales team. We are the everything. The majority of what we are entrepreneurs. And so that's one thing I'm not necessarily going to change at the beginning, but that's really one of my biggest advices is study your weakest area. And for so many people, that's going to be marketing or that's going to be some type of business. But I think that if you're at the point where do I go to art school and do I study art? Do I study photography? Do I get a fine art degree? Or do I take business classes? I'm not saying anything was a regret of mine in the past. I'm saying it was such an invaluable asset to have that background. That is 100% what I'm always going to recommend to anybody who's looking for advice.
Yeah. I think that is really important. And I think that's something that you and I relate on a lot is the fact that the business side of being a photographer is far more important in the big scheme of things for longevity and actually making a real career out of this than the camera. The camera plays such a small piece of it. And yeah, you need to be able to take in focus and properly exposed photos. But I like to say your clients don't know and don't care if the picture is an award winning picture that could go enter print competition and win the biggest award in the world. They just see the picture of themselves and their pony. And I don't know about you, but my clients from the early years when my pictures were not nearly as good as they are now, they still love their photos and were equally as obsessed with them as my clients are now, even though I'm a better artist. So I love that you brought that point up. So tell me this. Do you think that without your business degree in college and the experience you had in working in a studio, how much harder would it have been to start your studio if you didn't have that? And if you didn't have that, what would you recommend people do instead of if they're sitting here like, crap, I don't have a business degree. I don't have a photographer I can work for. What should I do to learn those things?
Yeah, so I think that ways that was very helpful for me was I never had to question which business entity am I going to be. I sat in business law classes. I understood the formation of businesses, and I knew from day one I wanted to be an LLC. I wanted to protect my personal assets and create one layer of separation. So from the get-go, I became an LLC. That is something where you don't need to sit in a business law class to understand. There is a plethora of free blogs, YouTubes, podcasts. There, at this time in history, maybe 25 years ago, that was not the case. But where we are right now, you have access to, I'm sorry, it's probably just as good as any degree that you could pay for out there if you were to put in the time. Save yourself $150,000. I don't know how much it is to go to college anymore, but it's a lot. And do that type of research on your own where all of that is free. So from the get-go, just I priced myself profitably, and I understood that from understanding inputs, understanding fixed costs and variable costs and profit percentages and whatnot. And I was really big into venture capital that back then. And so we were valuing the valuations of companies and what your profit margin translates into as a business valuation and everything. But there's an endless amount of free information about how to price yourself profitably. There are online calculators that you just type it all in and boom, it comes out. So it's not something that you need the formal education on, but it is something where everybody wants to spend time doing the fun stuff, which is playing out in the pasture with the baby horses and getting good there. And so many parts of the business are overlooked about the numbers or the formation or the contracts or all of the things that I feel my business education gave me a huge leg up on because I was able to create a solid foundation from the beginning and not have to do a lot of revising or scrapping things together or just adding things along. But that's available to everybody right now with simple searches, so long as you are intentional about it and you are seeking that type of information. And I'm still constantly seeking tax strategies and all sorts of stuff that I these days am listening to podcasts and YouTubes and everything and continuing my education on things like that. But the basic things that are things that I learned in school are just available to everybody right now. And I don't think for all of history that was the case. I think that is such an enormous advantage in the time period that we are right now is how much information is at our fingertips.
Yeah, I love that. And I have a coaching client that went to art school, and this is nothing against those of you that went to art school or those of you that are thinking about this, but I have a coaching client that went to art school, and she did a one-on-one coaching with me. And at the end of our time together, she was, holy crap, I learned more. This was far more valuable than anything I learned in art school. They don't prepare you for running a business. They teach you to be artists. And that ultimately in the real world only goes so far. So I do think that's super important is don't get lost in being a photographer because it's fun and you just using a camera. Remember that you owe it to yourself to actually take this seriously. And I think it's safe to say you're the perfect example of somebody that's business minded and I'm the CEO of my company. I'm going to run my company like a CEO and make the decisions I need to make. And I think photographers all too often have this mindset of, I'm just a photographer. This is just fun. It's just a little extra money. But each and every one of you owe it to yourselves to be paid well and to have that legitimate business that can pay your bills and do things for your family. And I think that's really what it's about. But the business side of things is necessary to get there. So I do love that. And in my college degree, because I have an animal science degree, so I didn't learn business. I grew up, my dad had a business. My dad was an attorney. So I grew up in his law practice, watching him be a business owner. So I always knew that I wanted to own a business. I also learned a lot from things he did that I don't ever want to do that. For example, I used to work for free for a lot of people just because he wanted to be generous and be helpful to people. And as a kid growing up, you see your dad doing all this work for free for people, and you're like, he could be spending time with us. And that's part of the reason why when I started my business, I was like, I'm going to be paid. I'm not going to work for free. That's not cool. I grew up watching my dad do that and be like, that was stupid. Why was he working for free for all those people? And that was a big thing that I learned just from my life growing up. And from my college degree, there's not a whole lot that I learned that really helped me in the business side, but I was on the horse judging team in college. And when it came to photographing horses, that was huge because that's a big part of when I see a horse, I'm constantly picking them apart and I'm like, this horse has a bad neck. This horse has a straight back. This horse has wonky legs. How are we going to hide it? And so that's been a really big thing that has come into play in my business from my time in college and stuff, was just that knowledge of horses and being able to pick horses apart is a blessing and a curse sometimes. Photographing a client, their horses over at the knees. I have to hide this. What am I going to do to cut their knees in these pictures? So just those little things that I picked up on. And I think a lot of y'all that are listening to this, you have life experiences, whether it was something you were around growing up, watching family members, watching friends, going into stores, going into shops, going into restaurants. There's lessons to be learned all throughout our lives that can help us with our business. So I think that's really important to remember. Tell me, I know you mentioned Creative Live, you learned from in those early years. I was a big Creative Live person too. I used to watch all the Jasmine Star and all the
Sue
other
Bryce.
Sue Bryce and
Yep.
Julia and
Yep.
all of the newborn photographers, all the wedding photographers. I watched all of them for all those years on Creative Live. And I learned a lot there. I learned a lot from YouTube videos. I used to watch YouTube videos. But really, when it came to shooting, I learned the shooting thing from just taking my camera out to the barn and sitting there for hours on end, toggling buttons and doing the thing. And then really, Creative Live was hugely instrumental in my business for sure. And then I also started doing workshops. I did a lot of, I think Katie Lamb, right? She's up in Dallas. So I did one of her first wedding work retreats she did years and years ago. I went to that. And then I did tons of workshops. I was going to a workshop every year or sometimes a couple a year. And they would teach business, but there would always be some shooting component as well. I did a few styled shoot type workshops. And I think I drew the line when there was this one workshop I went to. And my neighbor one day, she was like, have you seen this photographer? She's really good. Her pictures are so amazing. And I was like, oh, let me see. And I went and looked at the lady's website, and her entire website was only style shoot images. And I have all those same pictures. I could create a website that looks like that. You could think that was what my work looked like too. And when I had that experience, that was when I took a second look at what I was doing and investing my education time in, because I was, maybe these things aren't the best things for me to go to always. And maybe I need to reconsider where I'm investing that time. So I wish that when it came to my education, I would have looked for business specific education in those early years more. And I also wish that I would have looked for advice and learned outside of the photography world sooner, because I think that a lot of times in the photography world, it was just the same stuff regurgitated over and over again because they had all just learned from the same people that you were watching on Creative Live for all those years.
Yeah.
And I think that in that, I took a lot of the photography Kool-Aid. And when I started to learn from outside of the photography world, that made a big difference. And I know because you're saying this, a lot of your business stuff that you got was from business in general. So I think that's awesome that you have that outside perspective of what it looks like from the business world. And that's where I've tried to take my focus the last probably 6 years of where I'm learning from and where I'm getting content and ideas from. So what would you say about focus on education or your experience with education in those early years and what you might have learned or some pitfalls you would see for people to avoid?
Sure. So there was no educator for what I wanted to be. I didn't do weddings, and there was a great market for that. And I didn't do newborns, and there was a great educator market for that. And senior portraits, great. That was maybe the closest. I really had identified with Sue Bryce because what I decided was that boudoir glamour world, market wise, was very similar to what I was trying to do, in that my market didn't exist. I had to create it. Inquiries were not coming in. People weren't waking up thinking they needed pictures with their horses. I needed to create my own demand. And so within the photography world, I feel maybe Sue Bryce is who helped me think the most about creating a product worth lusting after, having an audience who on a very emotional level was connected to your brand. But the majority of my education would have been coming from outside of the photography world because there were no workshops I was going to, there were no educators I was subscribing to. Photography related questions, so easy to YouTube and how do I do back button focus or something like that. That was great. A lot of how I learned to shoot with natural light came from studying other photographers' work. I'm not going to lie. I would sit on those wedding blogs and really study, where is the light source in this image? Why is that appealing to me? What are those colors doing? How are those things mixing? It was really studying other people's film work and then just doing it on my own, just fail and repeat until I had my own style there. But I think I was passionate about the private equity in specific, and I would legitimately be in rooms where they were pitching companies to us, think Shark Tank in real life, that I loved being able to look through a company's financials, understand their elevator pitch in a couple seconds of what their market was, how they were getting in front of their audience, how they were either profitable or not profitable right now, what they needed to do, how you needed to change what they were doing to make them profitable. And then you're looking for an exit. You're selling the company, you're going public, you're doing something like that. And so I really loved being able to, in a non-biased, very objective way, look at all these other different companies and have ideas of how they could restructure personnel or change marketing structures or change the inputs in their financials and whatnot for a better output. And loved being able to do that finally for myself in my own business. So I just pay so close attention to how I'm being marketed to, and then I apply that to how I'm going to market my company and things like that, where I draw from so many outside inspirations, very outside of the photography world. I would say completely outside of the photography world. and then be able to just take what I've learned, what I'm passionate about, and then mold and create my own entity from that.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful for all of the education and everything that I've picked up. And I think it is just as valuable to know what you don't want to do as it is to know what you do want to do. So bad experiences are just as valuable as the good experiences are. I will always preach that. But yeah, that's it was different back then. There were less educators and there were mega educators
Yeah.
back
Mhm.
in that back in that 2010 to 2015 era of the educators were full-time educators. They were no longer in the photography space for the most part. Most of them left the
Mhm.
photography business to become an educator, and then they became a mega educator. But none of them really fit what I wanted to do.
Yeah. You said something at the very beginning of that. You said nobody knew that they need pictures with their horse. People weren't
Yep.
waking up, "Oh, I should book a session with my horse." And I think that is something that in the horse and pet photography world, we have to struggle with a little bit more. If you're a wedding, a family, a baby photographer, people wake up and they're like, heck yes, I need a photographer. Let me go to Google. Let me ask my friends. But I think that as a horse or pet photographer specifically, you have to create your own market and you have to create that own sense of educating people on the fact that they need you because they're not just going to come knock down your door. Unfortunately, eventually they will. But how many years in the photography industry do you think it took before people were really knocking down your door? Hey, I need to work with you. Let's book a session.
Yeah, okay, so that it was something I recognized from the very beginning because it what I was offering, I didn't know of anybody else offering it,
Mhm.
okay? So I was now, looking back, there were other people. I was unaware of them. Okay, so I'm not saying I'm the first person to do this. I'm not the first person to do this. I felt the first and only because I was unaware of other people who were doing similar things. The only equine photographers that I had experience with up to that point were horse show photographers who would do farm calls and come out to the barns. And some people would do that for their senior pictures, some people would do that for their stallion ads, those types of things, where it was the show photographer would come to the farm on a farm call and have a day shoot and photograph people in that setting. And so what I was doing, I wasn't aware of anybody else doing. And so I understood from the very beginning, nobody knows they need this. I know they need this because it's something I wish I had for myself before I sold these horses. It's something I really wish that I had for myself. You know, that 2012 where I was dreaming of this business and then the 2013 where I was starting this business, I would not say I found more of an established market until probably the 2016 and definitely 2017 when I was full time, where this was a thing. This was socially acceptable at this point. It wasn't such a weird thing to have a portrait with your horse done, but it was becoming so much more socially acceptable and done by many barns, many of your friends. It wasn't such a novel foreign concept for people. So I would say where I picked up my first camera in 2011 and started the business in 2013, it was probably about 2016 where there was a shift in I had a large enough audience size that was now warmed up and primed to what I was doing and understood what I was doing. And that was really helpful. And then a huge infiltration of more portrait equine photographers. There were horse show photographers and event photographers and things like that, but more in the portrait setting that everybody helped my market, because that then it just became even more socially acceptable, even more commonplace, even less of a stretch, less of a hard idea to wrap your mind around. So I felt big shifts probably 2016, 2017.
Yeah. I would say in my experience, because I've essentially built and launched 3 brands over the course of this time that I've been in business, because I launched my wedding brand and I did weddings and all the stuff. And then I did newborns, and I actually had 2 separate brands for those. Then when I started horses, I launched a 3rd brand. And when I started my equine photography brand, I was running 3 separate businesses essentially at that time. It was insanity,
Yeah.
which I do not recommend. But I I think launching my wedding brand and my newborn brand, it really showed me that in order to get the traction I needed to get to really make the business sustainable, it took a couple of years of doing a lot of really hard, deliberate work in the wedding world and in the newborn world before people really knew me and were like, yes, we want to come to Corinda. Yes, we want to work with Corinda. Yes, Corinda's amazing. We need her in our life. And when I launched my equine photography brand, I was okay. I learned my lesson the first 2 times. It takes years to build this. It takes years to get the traction you really need to become a staple and to have your name become a household name, so to say, in your industry. And when I did the equine brand, I took everything I learned the first 2 times around in those brands.
Yeah.
I tried to fast track that. So that way it only took a year to really cement myself as a household name in what I was doing versus years the other 2 times before.
Yeah.
But I was only able to do that because I had built 2 other brands. So I think it's important to remember, if you're listening to this and you're in year 1 or 2 of your business, it might take you 3 years to really grab hold of what you're doing and become known. And I think after you start to grab hold and become known, things get a lot easier, but you do have to climb your way up the roller coaster. You're gonna have to climb, and
Yeah.
it's gonna be hard. And
Yeah.
then once you get to the top, things do get easier, and you do get to become a little bit lazier in your business once you climb to the top. And it's not as difficult to get the traction and to get the people to knock on your door. But man, I think those first few years, it can be just a really trying thing to deal with the mental struggles of people are knocking down my door and they're not just, hey, Corinda, we want to work with you. What am I doing wrong? You're not doing anything wrong. It just sometimes takes a couple of years of really steady hard work to get there. So I wish I would have realized that with the wedding and the newborn brands, that those first couple of years, the work and the foundation I laid were going to pay off eventually. And once they did start to pay off, oh my gosh, things were amazing. So I wish I would have known that when I started. Um, Tell me how you built your clientele base in those early years. What kind of strategies did you use to just get people in your door in those early days?
Sure. So I started my business. It was part-time and I was working in finance. So I worked a lot of hours in finance. So I had pretty limited time. I felt really comfortable with about 2 to 4 shoots a month. And I did my best to keep my calendar full because I wanted fresh content constantly. And so a lot of that was reaching out to people on Instagram, on Facebook. Some of them I knew eventually, some of them I did not know. And I was really just looking for a, 2 different things. Some of it was just to fill my time, to get more experience, to have fresh content. Some of it was very intentional marketing plays. It was people who then I could get that work published. They were recognizable. It was easy to get them featured. It was easy to get a lot of cross promotion in industry publications and whatnot. So some of the people I would pick out a couple each year where I felt that they were very influential inside of the horse world. Well-respected horsemen, very recognizable faces, people who honestly were winning on a lot of the circuits because everybody wants the winner has and is looking up to what the winner is wearing and what they're doing, and it's hard to deny that they're trendsetters in their certain spheres. And so some of it was people who were winning in their respective circuits, but some of it was truly people who were just very well liked and very well respected because I feel like they had a lot of social influence as well out of the winning career, but somebody very trustworthy. And I just started writing down the names of who I wanted to work with, and I would slowly start interacting with them on social media, which would lead into more directly interacting with them, maybe in a DM or something like that, which then would lead to me just creating some type of pitch of, I would love to work with you. I think we should work together. Sometimes I would come up with the end goal in mind of where I wanted it featured or what I wanted it to do. And sometimes it was completely just for fun, just to uh, uh, just to give them pictures with their favorite horse type situation. And got denied just as many times as I got accepted. So I'm not going to say it was my batting average was 100%. Far from it. I'm trying to give away free pictures, and people are like, no, I'm good. And that was just part of it. And I would keep going someone else elsewhere, or if I really wanted them, keep surrounding them and photographing everybody around them until they came back to me type situation. So I would just circle around them. But that was the majority of me starting in those first couple years, was trying to pick out horse trainers, exhibitors, people in the industry who I felt attaching my brand to would be advantageous, because there are certain people, certain winners, certain very influential people who attaching my brand to would not be that advantageous, who don't have spotless reputations within the industry and whose names are not synonymous with trustworthiness and likability and whatnot. So it took a lot of very intentional. Like I said, I would have lists of names, and the names would go up and down that list as I just watched their character, watched their online presence, watched things like that. And then I very strategically picked who I wanted to be my brand ambassadors, not in a formal setting. In no way did I have any type of formal sponsored rider or brand ambassadors or anything like that, but just from a very generic sense. This was not any type of formal structured arrangement, but just a general marketing purpose situation. Whose face did I want to represent my brand?
Yeah. I think this is a really important concept that a lot of people, they have the right intention, but they do it in the wrong way. And I think that something that you said that was really important is that you interacted, you warmed these people up, were really warm and fuzzy with them before you were just like, hey, let me give you free photos. And also, I'm guessing that you had to also learn how to do it in a way that made you not sound like, I'm just desperate to take anybody's photos. You had to do it in a way that made yourself seem like authority, or else they were going to run away from you.
Yep.
How do you recommend that people approach this conversation? And for those of you that have listened to my podcast, or been around a training, I was talking about nobody wants free sushi. If you're standing on the corner with plates free sushi,
Yep.
Hey, do you want my free sushi? Nobody's coming to my restaurant today, so I just am trying to get rid of my sushi. Do you want it? People are going to be like, no, I don't want your free sushi. So there's a fine line here in how you spin this. So what would your recommendation be on how to drag those people through your door without sounding?
Sure.
Right.
So sometimes I gave the purpose of the shoot. So I need you to model XYZ clothes for XYZ company. And that sounds so much less about, hey, can I take your picture? Hey, I am looking for a model for this merchandise that I need to photograph. I think you would be a perfect fit. So much of it was flattery. So much of it was how much I love them, how much I love their horse. But a lot of my pitches, I have the end goal in mind. I say it's for this publication, it's going to be for this certain article, it's going to be for this certain company. I have an angle that it's not just a DM that says, let's collab. Have I done that? Yeah. And does it have a success rate? Yeah, especially now that I am more established. But at the beginning, when I did not have a name and I did not have an account, it wasn't just like, hey, we should work together, because that is so offensive. Nowadays, I might send a message that's, hey, I think we should work together. But anyway, but it's different. Back then, I much more had an end goal in mind. I would say there were a number of instances that I can count where I I did my homework and I did not reach out to the person I wanted to shoot. I reached out to essentially their agent, their managers, or the people who represent them. So if I wanted to photograph some notable person, I would figure out who maintains their schedule, who accepts gigs like this, and I went to their agent, their girlfriend, their whatever it was, and that yielded much higher success rates than going to the person directly as well. So there were a couple instances where just studying and doing my homework were really good. There were definitely instances where coming to the conversation with an actual plan was much more palatable and easy for people to say yes to. Yeah, I would say, because there's also just the creeper messages where it's just when they ghost you or leave you on red, if you're just, let's collab, period, or hey, we should shoot together, or something like that. I usually had more of an end goal in mind.
Yeah, I love that. And so you use that method in my brand in the early years of my horse photography brand anyway. Um, I did passion projects and that was my spin of it. It was my way to get
Yeah,
people through my door, to make people feel there was
yeah,
an end goal. The end goal was
yeah,
me sharing all of your horse's stories and really sharing your horse with the world. That was the end goal. And just saying, hey, if you want to work with me on this, you can apply to be a part of it. So they felt getting selected to be a part of it was a big deal. And it was. I had a ton of applications and I thought and I used strategy and I was very strategic in who I chose, right? I wasn't going to choose people that weren't good for my business and good for my brand. And also, too, another important point to point out here, especially in general for any photographer, but horse photographers specifically, I chose to focus on one specific genre. I wanted to go after the English world, specifically the hunter jumper world. Those are going to be my people. I'm going to focus all of my energy on those people. And I think you have done the same thing in your business. You have put a lot of energy into certain groups of people. And now you're really well known in those circles because you have really poured into those circles of people. And I'm guessing that's probably the people that you started out with photographing. Is that true, or how would you say?
yeah. It was the industries that I showed personally growing up,
Mhm.
so I had a lot more familiarity with them. But yeah,
Yeah. So if you're out there and you're a horse photographer, I would say don't feel like you need one client from all the different disciplines and genres. Because at the beginning, I think I did for a little bit. I remember doing my website and being like, I need an English horse, and then I need a Western horse, and then I need a reiner, and then I need the setting horse. I felt like I needed all of these different genres and all these variety of people and types of horses so that I didn't alienate one person or another. And now I'm like, hey, it's cool. If somebody goes on my website and they see a bunch of hunter jumpers and they're like, I'm a reiner, she only photographs hunter jumpers, I don't want to work with her. Cool. I don't care. But if they do see my work and they see it's not what they do, but they still love it and they still book with me, that's cool too. I would say 95% of my clients are all very similar type people come from the same genre. But I do get 5% of the people that are from different disciplines or completely outside of the bubble of what I normally do. So have you noticed in your business, are most of your clients from the same bubbles, or has it diversified over the years, or what has that looked like in the evolution of your business?
Okay, so at the beginning, I was extremely intentional to reach different spheres. I understood that in the horse world is small, but it's very segregated, and
Mhm.
and n- there are thin spaces that overlap. The Arabian people really keep to themselves in terms of they don't know who's winning in the cutting circle, and the cutting circle can't name a single dressage rider, and a dressage rider can't name a reiner, and most of the reiners don't know what's going on in the quarter horse all arounds, and so everything, paints and quarter horses, and is all pretty separated. Not a lot of overlap, and so I was very intentional when I was picking these spheres of influence to choose people in different groups,
Ooh,
to have a hunter jumper, to have an Arabian, to have an all around person, to have a barrel racer, to have that. I wanted to get in front of these different groups, and I was very intentional about that. And to me personally, sorry, I touched my microphone. To me personally, it mattered because I grew up doing so many different disciplines. I started in dressage, then I showed hunter jumpers before I went more Western into the all around. I rode horsemanship and reiners for TCU. And so I came from different backgrounds. And what I really understood was at the end of the day, we're all the same. And that is why I was so passionate about keeping a variety of horses in front of the lens. And I would say my focus on that has lessened over the years. I'm less concerned about trying to diversify and reach different groups, but I will say that all that super hard work that I did back then about being extremely intentional going into different fields, um, definitely worked to my advantage because now I do have a pipeline from the rodeo world and a lot of barrel racers. And I do have a pipeline coming from the reiners. And I do have a pipeline coming from the all-arounders. Now, the majority are all still quarter horses. I will say that. I had a big, steady hunter jumper clientele for a while. There were lines that were self-sustaining and bringing more leads and whatnot. And that could be traced back to that work that I did in the beginning. There were some that just didn't land, just didn't stay. And there are still some where I might only see one or two of that breed a year or one every other year type situation, even though I made a big effort 5, 6 years ago to get into that industry. It just didn't land. And what I will say is now I don't make such a big, great effort into reaching all of these different people groups, horse groups, into reaching all those people. I still want to stay as diversified as I can, but I put much less effort and emphasis into if that discipline or that breed really didn't stick, if I didn't land there, then I've moved on from trying to so hard into that ground and trying to reap a fruit that just was going to take more work than it was effort. I'd rather go where the lower hanging fruit is.
and for me, honestly, when I came into the horse photography world, I remember researching who's out there, who's doing what. And I remember coming on across your website and being, whoa, she has the quarter horse world on lock. I'm not going to touch it. And I, over the last, I think I've been doing the horse photography thing for 6 years now. Over the last 6 years, I've probably photographed maybe 10 clients that are really in the quarter horse world. What I think of what most of your clients are. And I honestly, it's okay with me and it's cool. And I have had that intention from the beginning of, I know that you have that world on lock and I know that you've got that taken care of. So why am I going to go try to attack a group of people that I know are already served and taken care of? When I came in, I was like, this other group doesn't look like there's anybody really serving them and focusing on them. So this is easy for me to go into and to attack. And I would just encourage everybody to really consider that. And that's not to say that there can't be multiple people doing the same thing or having the same type of clients. But at the same time, if you see a group that's underserved, go serve them by all means. And if you see a group that you're like, damn, that's going to be hard because she has that on lock, then consider that maybe that's not your group, or consider that you need to go in and do something different than what that person is doing, because it would not have served me if I would have come into this industry and said, this is what Kirstie's doing. Let me go in and do the exact same thing and try to get her people. Now, if I would have come in and been, I'm going to shoot with off camera flash and I'm not going to do natural light and I'm going to put people in, I don't know, some sort of weird alternative edgy look, then that would have worked because that wasn't what I saw her doing, and it would have been cool. But if I'm coming in as a natural light photographer who wants to put people in dresses to frolic around with their ponies, it would make zero sense. So I would just encourage y'all to find that area and that place that's underserved and start there, and be okay with the fact that over time other people will come, or decide, you know what, I want to do everybody. I'm going to be really diligent in doing everybody. But also, you're going to have to be really diligent in doing that. Kirstie said, it's going to have to find the people. And
it's going to be multiplied times of work. And I recognized it was much harder for myself because I was trying to do the same thing 10 different times in 10 different areas. It was multiplying my workload.
So, out of curiosity, what do you think would have happened if in those early years you would have come in and only really focused on the circle that you're really strong in now, and you wouldn't have diversified? Do you think that it would have taken off faster in your circle, or what do you think the results would have been?
So because of coming straight off the team, I would say specifically the Western pleasure and all around quarter horses and paints is what I had the most direct access to coming out of college. Because of my teammates, because of my location up here, I would say in no way would I have access to the rodeo and the reining community like I do right now, and some of the cutters and a lot of the hunter jumpers. I think I would have stayed really niche. And I don't think there is necessarily anything wrong with that, but I love my business right now, so I in no way regret that. I want to be diversified, and I love the people and the horses and the groups that I'm working with right now. So I would, yeah, I would do it again. I would do all that hard work again and try to be in as many industries. But I will say again, it came from a very personally driven place of I love warm bloods. I miss jumping. I love cutters. I have such a love and appreciation for the horse, and I'm pretty agnostic about the breed and discipline, that it was also intentional for me to just keep reaching different types of horses that I really love.
Yeah, I love that. Oh my gosh, I feel like we could talk about, you and I could sit down, and I'm pretty sure we could have like a whole day long podcast episode where all we do is talk about differences in our stories and all the things we've done. I think what's been really interesting about this conversation is the fact that I think we came into this conversation like, what would we have done differently if we started over? But I think that what we've discovered and what this has boiled down to today is that if we wouldn't have done the things we've done, if we wouldn't have fallen on our face a few times, if we wouldn't have had to learn the hard lessons and be rejected and screw things up, neither one of us would be here today where we're at. So I think what's important to remember is, regardless of what your journey is or how you started or where you've been or the long winding path that you had to take to get where you're at, you would not be where you're at if you hadn't gone through all of those things. And as much as I would like to say, if I could wave a magic wand, I would do these things differently. But I think that if I hadn't done everything I had done, I wouldn't be where I was at. If I wouldn't have spent years photographing weddings and learning how to pose under pressure, I couldn't shoot a session really quickly and efficiently. If I wouldn't have photographed babies, I would not know how to be patient with a horse that is more impatient than a toddler. When somebody's horse is impatient and just spinning around and being an idiot, it doesn't bother me. And that's because I spent years in the studio with babies trying to put babies to sleep and do newborn pictures. And I learned that my nerves couldn't be affected by the situation not working the way I thought it was supposed to. And so I feel all of these things and all these experiences you go through are important and they shape who you are. And I think it's really interesting that both of us today have been, I'm glad that I went through that. I'm glad I experienced that because I learned from it. So I feel like this has been an interesting turn of the conversation of what would we do differently, because I think we both agree that we wouldn't change. I don't think I'd really change anything that I've done in my business. Now that we've had this conversation today, I'm glad I went through what I went through. Do you agree on that? How do you feel about that?
I agree. I'll give you 2 regrets. If I were starting over, I'll give you 2 things I would definitely do differently. Number 1, my name. I chose Kirstie Marie because my last name was Friedenlund at the time, and I was engaged and knew I would be married, but I didn't want to do my future name as my business name. So that's why I went with my middle name. I've never liked it. I've always wanted to change it. It's 10 years now I've wanted to change it. And so I would have a different name. I would have a different business name. And number 2, okay, just like you said, I learned from it and it was great. I'm not going to totally take it away, but I started 100% film. And that was expensive as all get out. That is an expensive way to learn how to take a picture because you're over $1 every time you hit the shutter. Over $1. And that was 10 years ago. I bet it's more than that now. That was in 2013 to 2015 that I was exclusively film. And my regret with being exclusively film, there were many great things, and I can say 1,000 great things about it, but I missed so many shots because I am limited to 16 exposures per roll. I missed so many shots, whereas now I can lay on the shutter of my digital camera. I was manual focus on that Contax 645. I was manually focusing on horses, and I had 16 exposures per roll. And maybe I don't regret it fully, but I wish I went hybrid sooner, and I wish I went fully digitally sooner, because that was an expensive way to pay your dues. And when I switched to exclusively digital and didn't lower my prices, that was essentially $400 to $600 worth of lab fees that I was just getting in profit. And this is an easy trade.
Yeah. I did film for 2 years, hybrid film when I was doing weddings. Because of course, if your wedding's not free, you have to learn how to do film and do some film stuff because that's cool.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, I learned a lot. I'm glad I had that stint of learning film because it changes the way you light and it changes the way you do things.
Yeah.
But it is expensive and it is, I can't imagine shooting film with horses. That would be terrible.
I absolutely love film. I hire film photographers for my family portraits. I hired a film photographer for my wedding. I love film, but horses on film is so hard. Yeah, it's so hard.
I love that. I would say, okay, now that you said that, there's one thing. There's one thing I wish I would have done sooner, and that was raise my damn prices.
Okay.
I regret that I was slow and steady. I would just raise my prices every year, get to the end of the year and be like, oh, I didn't make enough money. Let me raise my prices. Let me raise my prices.
Yeah.
And it took a while before I was, okay, this is stupid. I should plan with the end goal in mind. And it sounds like that's something that you totally did. I think you came in.
Yeah, no, I was profitable from the gates. Yeah, I was profitable from the gates. Basically, I was saying I earn X amount at my current job. So if anybody's going to make me work overtime, I'm going to get paid overtime and I'm going to make photography pay me more than finances. And
Yeah.
so that's how I started. That was my big stance on it. Cause that was, look, you're taking my nights and my weekends away from me. So if you're going to make me work overtime, you're paying me better than what I'm currently making. So I came from the gates profitable, but let me tell you, when I cut, and I built the prices to be profitable, including the film. And so when I cut the film out, then I was rolling in dough because now I'm so much more profitable because I had built it with those expenses in there. And so just removing the expenses, it was, oh,
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Which is interesting because now that's the one thing I tell everybody. I'm like, charge your prices from the beginning. Don't be cheap in the beginning. And I think the reason that I'm so passionate about that is because I spent so many years being, I could be flipping burgers at McDonald's and making more money.
yeah.
And it took me going through that to get to where I am today. But I guess I wouldn't be here teaching everybody to do this and you against it if I wouldn't have gone through that myself. But yeah, I definitely wish I would have raised my prices sooner.
That's a good one.
So, yeah, this has been so fun today. And thanks for joining us. Oh my gosh, there's so many topics that I'm sure we could talk about. If y'all have listened to this today and you've enjoyed it and you want to hear us talk about something else, I know all of you course photographers are probably geeking out and you're like, Anna and Kirstie, we need to hear more. If you want to hear more, tell us what you want to hear about and share with us, and maybe we can get on and do another episode sometime later this year. Bye, guys.